The Prime Minister, Andrew Lewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I should begin by saying that we, of course, condemn the attack on Iraqi military bases hosting coalition forces. Iran should not repeat these reckless and dangerous attacks, but must instead pursue urgent de-escalation. Mr. Speaker, I know that the thoughts of the House are also with our friends in Australia as they tackle the bushfires, as they are with the families of those killed in the Ukrainian air crash. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Andrew Lewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Motor neurone disease is a terrible terminal illness, with a third of people dying within a year and more than half within 2 years of diagnosis. The last thing terminally ill people and their families should be worrying about are their finances. The Scrap 6 Months campaign by the Motor Neurone Disease Association, which is based in my constituency of Northampton South, has managed to bring the important issue of payments to those with terminal illnesses to the fore, and I welcome the Department of Work and Pensions review of the special rules for terminal illness announced last July. But can I ask the Prime Minister to join me in pressing the DWP to complete its review and to scrap 6 months?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pay tribute to my honourable friend and the work he's doing for those suffering from motor neurone disease, which is indeed a terrible illness. And we're doing everything we can to ensure that the welfare system works for sufferers of that illness. And that's why the Department of Work and Pensions is indeed looking at how they can change the way we help people nearing the end of their life with the most severe conditions, including motor neurone disease. And I'm sure that my honourable friend, the Right Honourable Friend, Secretary of State for DWP, would be only too happy to meet my honourable friend at an early meeting, earliest convenience.
Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by paying tribute to Andrew Miller, the former member for Ellesmere Port in Neston, who sadly died on Christmas Eve. He sadly lost to this House. He spent over 20 years here, was an expert on science and technology, made an enormous contribution to this House. Our thoughts are with his family and his friends, and he's deeply mourned on this side of the House for the great contribution that he made. I also join the Prime Minister in sending sympathies and support to friends in Australia, where the fires have claimed over 20 people. Along with the loss of human life, hundreds of millions of animals have also been destroyed as a result of this. This is a warning of what global warming does to all of us, and we've got to take this very, very seriously, the threat of climate change. And I join the Prime Minister also in thoughts going to the friends and family of those who died, sadly, in the Ukrainian plane that crashed in Tehran last night. Mr. Speaker, following last night's attack on the United States bases in Iraq, can the Prime Minister confirm that he opposes any further retaliation or escalation in violence in a situation where the region is in real risk of going into a full-scale war?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course I can confirm that, and I can point out to the Right Honourable Gentleman that the United Kingdom has been working solidly since the crisis began to bring together, in particular, our European allies in their response. And the House will have noted the E3 declaration that was issued by France, Germany and the United Kingdom, in which we drew particular attention to the baleful role played in the region for a very long time by Qasem Soleimani, and that was a collective European view, but a view that doesn't yet appear to be shared by the Right Honourable Gentleman. I've been interested in all his commentary that he hasn't yet raised that matter.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, following the government's support for the United States over the assassination of General Soleimani, is the Prime Minister confident that United Kingdom troops and civilians are not at further risk in the region and beyond?
Mr. Speaker, I can of course confirm, and that's an important question, that as far as we can tell, and there were no casualties last night sustained by the US, and no British personnel were injured in the in the attacks. And we are doing everything we can, of course, to protect UK interests in the region, with HMS Defender and HMS Montrose operating in an enhanced state of readiness to protect shipping in the Gulf. And as the House heard yesterday from my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Defence, we've relocated non-essential personnel from Baghdad to Taji, and we will do everything that we can to prevent an escalation.
Jeremy Corbyn.
The government has said that it's sympathetic to the assassination of General Soleimani. What evidence has the Prime Minister got to suggest that this attack on him and his death was not an illegal act by the United States?
Well, Mr. Speaker, clearly the strict issue of legality is not for the UK to determine, since it was not our operation. But I think that most reasonable people would accept that the United States has a right to protect its bases and its personnel. And I would remind the House that the individual concerned, Qasem Soleimani, was not only responsible for many years, amongst other things, arming the Houthis with missiles with which they attacked innocent civilians, arming Hezbollah with missiles which again they used to attack innocent civilians, sustaining the Assad regime in Syria, one of the most brutal and barbaric regimes in the world, and of course supplying improvised explosive devices to terrorists who, I'm afraid, killed and maimed British troops. That man had the blood of British troops on his hands.
Mr. Speaker, if we stand by international law, as I'm sure the government does and would want to, then surely killing somebody in a foreign territory is an illegal act and should be condemned as such. If we believe in international law, that should be the solution to the problems in the world. And as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, could the government say what representations have been made to ensure that the Iranian officials that want to attend the Security Council in order to try to bring about a resolution to the very dangerous situation in the region will be allowed to attend? And in the event of the US administration blocking them, what representations will he personally make to President Trump to make sure the UN can operate in the way that it should and must be able to operate?
I think the right honourable gentleman is probably well aware that the United States has a duty under international law to allow people to visit the UN, and that is indeed the position that the UK supports.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Iraqi Parliament passed a resolution calling for foreign troops to leave their country. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the British government will respect any decision made by a sovereign parliament and government in Iraq that may make such a request in the future, and will respect the sovereignty of Iraq as a nation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I spoke, as the House can imagine, I've spoken extensively to our friends around the world, including our friends in Baghdad. And Prime Minister Adel Mehdi, who, of course, has, like many people in Iraq, has come to rely and depend on the support of coalition forces, not least from the UK. And as you will know, there is a very significant NATO mission in Iraq at the moment, helping in the fight against Daesh. And I think it is my wish, the wish of this government, I think it should be the wish of this House, that we should do everything that we can to support the security and integrity of Iraq and of the Iraqi people.
Jeremy Corbyn.
My question was if the government would respect the sovereignty of Iraq, its parliament and its government, and the Prime Minister did not answer that question. The United States' actions have undoubtedly escalated the risk of a dangerous conflict and in an already destabilised region, putting civilians, UK troops and nationals at risk, and leaving the Iran nuclear deal in danger of being dead in the water. This government's response is not putting the interests of this country first, but instead seems more interested in prioritising the Prime Minister's relationship with President Trump over the security of the region and of this country. Isn't the truth, Mr. Speaker, that this Prime Minister is unable to stand up to President Trump because he's hitched his wagon to a trade deal with the United States, and that prioritises everything else that he ought to be considering.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was kind of waiting for the little green men thing to come out at the end about the trade deal. This is absolute fiction. But what I will say is that the UK will continue to work for de-escalation in the region. I think we're having a great deal of success in bringing together a European response and in bridging the European response with that, of course, of our American friends, and working both with the Iranians and with the Iraqis to dial this thing down. But he should be in absolutely no doubt. And this is, of course, the leader of the opposition who has famously received £10,000 from Iranian press TV. He should be in absolutely no doubt that we are determined to guarantee with everything that we can the safety and security of the people of Iraq, whereas he, of course, would disband NATO. And it is this government that will continue to stick up for the people across the Middle East who have suffered at the hands of Qasem Soleimani and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Quds Force that he has led and whose terrorism he has promoted. And I'm very surprised at the end of these exchanges that he has yet to condemn the activities of Qasem Soleimani and the Revolutionary Guard.
In the last 10 years, there have been volumes of reports, independent reviews and recommendations calling for an end to inappropriate inpatient care for people with learning disabilities or challenging behaviour. In the wake of the Winterbourne Views scandal alone, there were 7 such reports. As we start a new decade, would my right honourable friend state how many people are still trapped in inappropriate care settings and instruct the Department of Health to act on those recommendations and the asks of families and campaigners so these very vulnerable people can get the care they need and deserve?
I thank my right honourable friend for the passionate campaign that she wages. I can tell her the number, his current number is 2,190, which is patently unacceptable, but it is moving down. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, tells me the number is coming down rapidly. We have a pledge to reduce it by 50%, and I'm sure that he will meet her very shortly.
Ian Blackford.
Yeah.